All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, finishing up our discussion pretty much on CSS and CSS3. In this video, we're going to go over CSS3 advanced selectors, but there's so many, we're just going to mention them and talk about them more when we go through the jQuery section. Review again pseudo-classes, which we've already talked about. Take a quick look at gradients, another look at shadows, a look at transformations, one at animations, and then finally going back and checking again about layouts. So some of this is stuff that we've done before. So CSS selectors, as you can see, there are many of them. All right, let's try to break them down. Well, if I use a CSS selector, for example here, .intro, that's a class of intro. # first name, that's an ID of first name. The asterisk is everything. P is paragraph. Div comma P means select all divs and all paragraphs. Div P means select all paragraphs within a div. Div greater than sign P means select all paragraphs that are children of a div, direct descendants. Div plus P is all paragraphs that are placed immediately after a div. P tilde UL, every UL that's preceded by a P element, so you can see what's going on here. There are a bunch of attribute things where you can sit there and basically check for different things. So for instance, if I wanted to check for all labels, or I wanted to check for all text boxes or whatever. The ones that are here are in alphabetic order, and again, it just takes way too much time to go over them. Let's just hit on a couple of them. P : before. Insert something before the content of each P tag or each paragraph. Input checked. Input disabled. All right? Enabled. The first child, first of type, etc., as you would think, it's going to select the first one. Focus, for what has the focus. Hover, on mouse hover. Link, all unvisited links. A lot of things in here with nth. Well, the reason there's a lot of things in here with nth is you've got a bunch of stuff with first child and first this and first that. All right, like the first child, the first letter of something, the first line of something, the first one of some type. But then you get the nth where you maybe don't know what the first one is, or you don't want to necessarily choose the first one. Not only is there nth, there's a few that are last. So you can do the first, you can do the nth, or you can do the last. All right. Now, a long time ago, I did a couple of videos, and I'm going to see if I can find those, and I'm going to throw them out there too, because in one video what I did was I literally went over, it's about 96 slides, and I went over every one of the selectors that I could find. But CSS selectors are patterns used to select the desired elements for styling. It says use our CSS selector tester to demonstrate the different selectors. So when you look in here, when you look at all the stuff that's in here, all right, it says check which selector gets the desired result. So if I check H1, all right, pretty obvious what's going on there. There's an example. So is that a great example? It works. Let's jump into the pseudo-classes. Now, we've talked about these before. They're typically associated with hyperlinks. So if you've got an unvisited link, so a link you have not been to yet, this should make it red. If you've got a link you've already visited, so remember, unvisited links are blue, kind of a medium blue by default. Visited links are typically purple by default. Here we're changing them to green. Mouse over is literally when you hover over a link And in this case, it's going to be purple. And a selected link is when you click on it and the mouse is literally clicking down on it. So in this case, that's blue. Talked about this earlier, but as it says, hover must come before link and must come before visited. Active must come after hover. So there's a definite order to this. Link, visited, hover, active. However you remember that, if you're going to use all of them. So here's an example as it says, hover over me to show the P element. So it's like a tooltip right there. So notice it does not display by default. It's yellow with 20 pixels of padding. But those are for paragraphs. But when you hover over paragraphs, display them in a block format. So there's a lot of ways that this stuff can be used. Kind of going back to what we just talked about with the selectors a minute ago, notice first child matches the specified element that is the first child of another element. So this matches any paragraph tag that's the first child of any element. And it says we want it to be blue. Why is only this one blue? Well, this is the first paragraph in a body. That's the second, so it's not going to have anything special. That's the third, so it's not going to have anything special. Just the first child. That's all it matches there. In much the same way, match just the first I element in all P elements. So there's the first I one right there. So that one's supposed to be blue. There's the first one there. So that one's blue. All right, that says all first paragraph elements. The Lang pseudo-class, as mentioned here, allows you to define special rules for different languages. Not going to touch that one. Again, all the pseudo-classes, so we've already talked about those. Okay. And I guess I went back and I'm at pseudo-classes. Yeah. So again, here they all are. I just went over those. And there's some more elements. All right, let's go into gradients. Gradient, typically, when you do a gradient, what you're doing is you are morphing or transitioning from one color to another color. Here is an example of top to bottom gradient, which, as it says, is the default. You can go top to bottom, bottom to top, left to right, right to left. You can go diagonally. So there's a lot of ways that you can set this up. So let's grab this CSS that's here. We haven't gone back and done this in a bit. Now, quite often when you do this, you don't just say background red, etc., going from red to yellow, but you quite often put these browser prefixes in here. Minus WebKit minus is used for Chrome and for Safari, because Chrome and Safari both use the WebKit engine. Minus O is for Opera, minus Moz is for Firefox, minus MS, which is not shown here, minus MS is for Internet Explorer. So let me grab this. All right, we have here linear gradient top to bottom. This linear gradient starts at the top as a red color, and it transitions to yellow by the bottom. Again, this is the default. So we just made a div with nothing in it. And then the author puts here a little note that says, IE9 and earlier does not support the concept of gradients. Why is this not showing? That was saved. That was saved. Got the minus WebKit, so that should be set. Oh, for some reason they call that grad, and they call that grad 1. Don't know why. Let's check it out now. And there it is. So again, a lot of times when you work with this, you work with it for special effects. There is a diagonal gradient. As it says, you can work with angles. You can work with multiple colors. So notice we've got 3 colors listed in here. If you wanted to show a rainbow type of effect, kind of like that. So if we look at that example, you can see what happens. Transparency just says that if you want to, you can use RGBA. Remember the alpha that we talked about earlier. Repeating gradients, you get some really ugly effects there when you do that. Radial gradients are kind of neat because they give you a circular type of look. A radial gradient is defined by its center. To create one, you must define at least 2 color stops, and they show that in here. I'm not going to go through any more of this. Hopefully that's enough. That's kind of neat. All right, and as always, there are exercises and examples at the bottom of each of these. All right, shadows. Most people equate shadows with text shadows. They don't have to be, but they usually are. I mean, if you use a text shadow, of course it does. But you can have shadow effects also. All right, so notice 2 pixel, 2 pixel, so you can see that's a 2 pixel horizontal and a 2 pixel vertical shadow. You can do that and add color to it, so the example right here and right here are identical, except the second example says that we want the shadow to be in a different color. By default, it's the same color as the text. You can add a blur. So again, most of this stuff is done for effect. All right. The thing you have to watch out for, and I probably am not saying anything you don't already know, but I have seen sites before where they have so many special effects and other things that people are like, wow, that's really a cool site. And somebody says, what was it? You know, what was it a site about? I don't know. So you lose the message that you're trying to convey with the site because you're so engrossed in trying to put in all these special effects. All right. So there's white, and then the background is black. Neon glow, multiple shadows. As I mentioned already with this stuff, you know, just watch it because it's so easy. It's just so easy to put too much in. CSS, as you notice here, has got a box shadow property to apply shadows to elements. Again, many different examples of how this can be used. As always, there are exercise examples at the bottom. Again, there's a box shadow to add 1 or more shadows to an element, and a text shadow, which does the same thing but with text. All right, the transform property. Let's take a look at a couple of examples here. Images thrown on a table. See, when you transform, typically what you're doing when you transform is you're rotating something, for lack of better words. There are examples in the Terry Felk Morris textbook that we're going to look at in class. Again, this is done for effect. Not bad as long as it's not overused. Animations can be so cool. All right. When the animation is finished, it changes back. So you'll notice that when we ran that, how it animated to different colors. All right. Now, one thing that we will look at as far as animations go, not so much with CSS, and you can animate with CSS. All right, now that's a lot faster. But one of the places, in my opinion, there you go. You're taking that on the screen and not only changing its color, but making it move. One of the places where something like jQuery shines is with animation. And I think it's much easier to animate here. Setting up web, keyframes, etc. is a lot of work. It's much less work when you do it with jQuery. Here's another example. Okay, they look very similar to one another. How many times should an animation run? There's one. There's two. Should go one more time because our animation iteration count was 3. You can run it in reverse. Pretty obvious, you're just saying the direction is reverse, again with a count of 3. You can specify curves. Again, as already mentioned, be very leery of putting too much stuff in. Here are the major properties for animation. Keyframes, as it says, it specifies the animation code. The direction we just looked at, any delay, the duration, all right, the direction. Now that's pretty much it. When I come back, I'm going to talk just a few minutes and try to basically take all that we've done for this animation section, put it in perspective, and then of course we'll go on after that.